Maddie, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Andrea. It's great to be here with you.
Maddie, you've spent nearly 4 decades helping the world understand aging. Why is this important for you? And what's one stereotype about growing older that you wish we could erase forever?
Well, as you said, I've been digging deep into the research on aging, longevity, the new kind of retirement for literally close to 40 years. And that's probably longer than some of your listeners have even been alive. But what I try to do is stay on the cutting edge. And what I've seen happen is that this whole area of interest in longevity and living better, longer has really exploded. I mean, it used to be something that was sort of at the fringes, and it's really gone mainstream, which I think is terrific because if we can learn not only how to live longer, but to live better, then my God, that gives us so many opportunities to live a broader, happier, more goal-oriented life, and I don't know, I think that sounds just awesome. So that's one of the great things I've discovered. One of the less than great things that I've really come to experience and see firsthand is that there's this real bias that's still socially acceptable against older adults. I mean, we have seen that sexism is not okay, racism is not okay, but ageism, it's fine. One of the people I interviewed for my book, Ageless Aging, was a woman who was a Black lesbian over the age of 65. And I said to her, like, what's the worst bias, negative bias that comes your way? Is it sexism? Is it your gender identity or your gender, your lesbianism? And she's Black also. I didn't even mention that. She said, hands down, the worst is the ageism. There's so much discrimination that comes towards us just because we've had a lot of birthdays. And that to me, as a 75-year-old woman, is insane.
What are some fundamental shifts that you believe are essential for us to change our view about aging, and particularly when we're looking even at the discrimination that can emerge within organizations where certain people are struggling to find a job after a
Mm.
certain age? What is essential in your view that needs to change in society?
Two things. It's not just about one thing. It's about a variety of different attitude shifts and expectation shifts as well. Just as an example, for decades and decades, we thought genetics were our destiny. We thought that whatever our genetic package might be, and like for me, my genetic package is horrible, you would assume, well, I can't do anything about it. So live life and know that you're probably only going to have so much time where it's good if you have a bad genetic package like me. But the more recent science tells us a completely different story. They say that up to 85 to 90% of our health and well being has to do with not our genes, but our lifestyle and our environment. So that puts us in charge. We are in control of what our longevity, what our long life can look like. And by owning that, I think that we can start changing hearts and minds, making people realize that not only do they have control, 75 or 80 or 85 comes in many different forms, and you have some control over what those forms look like. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I think it's important that corporate America in particular, those younger adults who are in corporate America and doing the hiring, that they recognize the fact that there are certain qualities that you gain as you get older. So yeah, you may lose some things, but you're also gaining some things. So what are those things? Well, they're pretty important. For one thing, you gain some wisdom. Now, not every older person gains wisdom, but a lot of us do. We have corporate wisdom through our experience. We know like where things are, how the culture works, if you will, and how things are done in a corporation. So we can mentor younger people to better understand that. The other thing that we have that I think is like incredibly valuable to offer to corporate America and to business in general is we have tremendous resilience. Resilience is a big word and it's become very popular. And we recognize the fact that as older people, one of the great things that has happened to us is we've been through a lot of experiences. We've seen the ups and downs of the economy. We've been hired, we've been fired, we've seen all kinds of things go on in the world. We've seen viruses. I mean, for God's sakes, we've gone through so many bad experiences and come out the other end and realize, you know what? I can survive this. In fact, I might even thrive from this. And to have that kind of perspective and point of view, that's resilience. And that's what older adults have in spades. So I think it's something that corporate America ought to really embrace.
I fully agree. In your book, Ageless Aging, which is phenomenal, you
Thank
talk
you.
about specific actions that we can take to actually ensure that we enjoy life to the
Hmm.
fullest, no matter what our age is. Can you take us through some of those holistic recipes, as you call them in your book, for
Sure.
ageless aging, please?
Okay, so I'm not a scientist and I'm not a physician. But as a researcher for decades, one of the great tools that I have is that I have this network of the very top experts in the fields, scientists, researchers, physicians, neurosurgeons, all kinds of experts. And when I went to write Ageless Aging, rather than rely completely on my own experience, and my own research, I reached out to close to 100 of them. And I was lucky enough that most of them got back to me and were happy to contribute their thoughts about what's the secret sauce? How do we live better longer? And what I was really thrilled to see was there was a lot of agreement. And one of the key pieces is that I learned that it's not just about one thing. It's about a bouquet of different ingredients that all work together. They actually don't exist in silos, but instead impact each other. Just for an example, one that you might not think of is your financial well being. If you don't have your financial house in order, your cortisol levels are going to go up and create all kinds of mental anguish and maybe affect your sleep and what you decide to eat. And if you decide to exercise or not. So there's this pinball effect of not having your financial house in order. Same thing, we can take any of the ingredients. Sleep, for instance, is often an overlooked aspect. There's lots of people who are now paying more attention to it, but it's not just the quantity of sleep. We know, get 7 to 9 hours a night, but that's not true for everyone. It's the quality of your sleep that really matters. And sleep science, for instance, is really morphing into circadian rhythm science. So what you do in the mornings are as important as what you do at night in order to get the best sleep. So, for example, you ought to get up in the morning and worship the sun for 10 minutes. Doesn't take long. Doesn't have to be complicated. None of this is complicated, by the way. And if there was a silver bullet, the silver bullet would, of course, be exercise. I'm sure you might have guessed that already, but it's not necessarily just walking 30 minutes, which is what a lot of people say. Yet doing cardio is important, but equally, if not more important, I would say more important is muscle strengthening. We begin to lose muscle mass. That's called sarcopenia. We begin to lose muscle mass as early as in our 50s. So you don't want to lose muscle mass. So you want to really build your strength. And by the way, the most recent science tells us that muscle strength should be a new vital sign, similar to our blood pressure and our heart rate. That's how important it is. So there's like a bunch of other ingredients, which I'm happy to go through. I don't know how many you want me to focus on.
Yes, I want to dive in maybe in the first one that you mentioned, the financial health. And in your book, you reference that on average, women only have 70% as much money retirement in their retirement
That's
accounts
right.
as men do. What advice would you have for women to
Hmm.
own their financial future and better plan for retirement?
Okay, so first, don't feel bad about this, everyone. Women in particular, because we know the reasons why you don't have as much in your financial piggy bank as men. It has to do with the fact that we spend more years getting educated. So hopefully we get better jobs. We generally are the ones who do the caregiving, caring for aging parents, caring for our own children. So we take time off from the workforce. And by doing that, we're doing a great service to humanity and to our family. However, it has financial consequences. I mean, we lose the opportunity for a promotion. We lose social security benefits and benefits in terms of our pensions. I mean, there are a variety of different implications by taking that time off. Now, I'm not saying don't take the time off, but maybe if you have a spouse partner, make them aware of it. And maybe they can help compensate for your financial well being when it comes to later in life, especially because women oftentimes outlive their spouse. I mean, we've won the longevity lottery. Women live longer than men by about 5 to 7 years, and that's huge. So we spend more time in retirement, and yet we save less for retirement. So, yeah, we're oftentimes taking care of a spouse partner towards the end of their life and maybe even dipping into our own savings to help make that happen. So there's some things we need to plan for in advance. Now, if we don't, because there's probably some women who are in their 50s and 60s listening today and saying, oh my God, I'm screwed. But you're not, because it's never too late. Most of us are really looking at the idea of working longer. I mean, retiring at 65, it's not a given anymore for any of us. And by the way, if average life expectancy, which it is for a woman, is about 81, and you're retiring at 65, that's a lot of years to be spending living on a fixed income. I would also add that's a lot of years to not have a strong sense of purpose. And work is one of the ways we get a strong sense of purpose and we get our social connections. So I would urge everyone to do some kind of work for money if possible. If you're in one of these financial situations where you need that extra money, work. Do some work. Now, that may be easier said than done, but there are companies who are creating programs for older adults. They're trying to attract older adults because they don't have enough younger workers. And they're beginning to realize the value of older workers in the workforce.
It's so important. If we look at the research that is also emerging, whereby we see that indeed women are living longer, at the same time, we're seeing that women have a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia. And in your book, you talk about increasing brain span. Are there specific strategies that maybe you could share with our listeners that would help them increase brain span?
Yeah. Let me begin by saying women, we've won the longevity lottery, but we're losing when it comes to both health span and brain span. We are not doing as well as men. So let me zero in on that brain span that you were talking about. Women are twice as likely to suffer from Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline than men. And that is seriously scary. In fact, from studies we've done at AgeWave, the number one scariest thing that people look at when they look at longevity and what scares them the most, it's getting Alzheimer's disease or cognitive decline. So there's no cure. Sure, there's some drugs out there that can halt the symptoms, just the symptoms, not the disease, but they have some pretty intense side effects. And those side effects, although it's not talked about openly, they are worse for women than they are for men, scientifically proven to be worse for women. However, there is some good news. And the good news is what we want to focus on. And that is that scientists have told us that there are some things we can do to prevent or delay Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline. And you want to do that, especially if it runs in your family. And I would say almost everyone I know has it in their family tree somewhere. So, what are some of those things? Okay, so let's begin with exercise. You want to exercise, you want to build that muscle strength, and you want to do cardio because it has a direct effect on your brain. The size of your hippocampus, which is where memory stored, is directly affected by exercise. Number two, this is not rocket science, by the way. This is almost common sense. It's what you eat that really matters. You want to eat the rainbow, and I don't mean Fruit Loops. I mean eating colorful fruits, vegetables, and whole grains and getting rid of the bad. This is one place where I do agree with Robert Kennedy. We need to get rid of those ultra processed foods, the seed oils, go through your cupboards and get rid of all that stuff and just don't even ever buy it again. Eat the good, get rid of the bad. And by the way, intermittent fasting is actually really good for your brain. Yeah, you don't want to do the 16 or 18 hours a day. That's actually bad for your kidneys. Dr. Walter Longo, who is the pioneer behind intermittent fasting, he told me that that's dangerous. You want to go just 12 to 13 hours from your last meal at night to your first meal in the morning. And let's face it, that's pretty easy to do. So, yes, intermittent fasting, great. Sleep. You want to prioritize sleep. You want to wake up in the morning. This is like the test you do for yourself. You want to wake up in the morning and feel well rested. How many of us actually get to feel that way? There are other things that are really important. For instance, managing stress. You want to keep your cortisol levels down. How do you do that? There's a whole bunch of ways, but certainly try some meditation. Meditation is something that sounds complicated, but there's a ton of apps out there that can help walk you through how to meditate. And then there's two or three more that I really want to mention because they're not only good for your brain, they're good for your health span as well. One of them is we've alluded to it already, and that is having a sense of purpose. I know it may sound like a nice to have, but it's a have to have. And there's, by the way, a ton of ways to have a sense of purpose. For some people, it might be starting your own podcast or doing something, doing volunteer work or getting that second job. But for others, it may just be taking care of your grandkids or walking the dog. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get a sense of purpose. And then we can't forget social connections. Social connections, believe it or not, loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Take that in. That's crazy. So you want to have at least a few close friends or family that you relate to, and then maybe have some micro relationships. For instance, maybe you go to the grocery store and there's a checker and you say hi to them all the time and they start to know your name and they get to know you. Same thing if you go out for coffee and the barista starts to know your name as they're calling it out every day. So, those are like these micro relationships that are very, very meaningful in the long term. And then the last thing I want to mention, because this one is a huge one, and that is your own attitude towards your aging and the aging of those around you. There's been studies that have done that tell us that it adds years to your life. And yeah, you might know that already, but there's also studies, some that have been done even more recently that tell us that it actually has a positive impact on your brain health. So think, your thoughts, they actually translate into actions that you take, but they also are meaning that impact your brain directly. And you want to own that. And you want to try to think the most positive things you can about your own aging, which, by the way, isn't always easy.
In your book, you reference that we can live actually 7.5 years longer
That's
if we
right.
have a positive attitude about aging, which I find incredible. So it's really about moving beyond denial and really just embracing and loving the journey and the
Yeah.
reality that comes. all ages.
Yeah, it is, and you're right about that 7.5 years, but I find equally amazing is that having a positive attitude on your own aging and aging of those around you, which I think is the important other element of it, it can reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease by 40%, which, by the way, can affect your brain health as well.
Yes, absolutely fascinating. There's also research that you refer to in your book that happiness forms a U curve with age.
So there was research done at Stanford University. We've done some similar research at AgeWave that confirms this, but I'll just reference the Stanford for now. They came up with this research that said there is a U curve of happiness. So what that really translates to is that when you're young, you're super happy. Things are great. You don't have a care in the world. I don't know if that's so true anymore, honestly, since COVID. And this research was done prior to COVID, but let's just think that, yeah, when you're young, in the scheme of things, you have less to worry about. However, then you come to midlife, your 20s, you're trying to build a career, maybe trying to find a life partner, coping with some of the challenges of being in the real world in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then if you have a family, that starts your happiness levels, believe it or not, dip quite dramatically in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. Then comes your 50s when maybe you're becoming an empty nester or your kids are old enough to go off to college, or maybe you just chose not to have kids. Your happiness levels begin to go catapult. They go skyrocketing high. They go super, super high. And your 50s and your 60s look great. Now this study only went through 65. I'm 75. I would say that my 70s have been, I'm only halfway through, but since my 60s, we'll just say it that way, I've been incredibly happy, but I'm healthy. I've had to cope with some challenges, some health challenges. For instance, I had a double hip replacement, but because I did something called pre-covery, I really planned for this very effectively. I was actually born with hip dysplasia, didn't know it. I was bone on bone in my hips when I was in my 60s, and I was told, "Hey, you have no choice. You better go get a double hip replacement." And I chose to do both at one time because I knew if I just did one, I'd never go to the next one. That was just not who I was. My friends, by the way, who were doctors, told me I was nuts, that the pain that I'd be in would be so excruciating that I'd never really recover. So I decided to plan for it. Decided to do a pre-covery program. And so what I did, I called up a couple, Andy Weil and Mark Hyman, a few of the, big experts out there, and they told me what to do. I went on a gluten-free, dairy-free, anti-inflammatory diet, which was not very hard at all. In fact, I still pretty much maintain that diet. Sugar also as little as possible. I just modified my exercise slightly, started meditating. I started doing some visualization to see a positive outcome. And it worked. Within 6 weeks, all the pain in my hips went away, all of it. And then when I did the surgery, they told me I'd be in the hospital for a week. I was in the hospital for one day. They also told me, expectation management, you're probably going to have to use a walker or a cane for about a month. I used it for 2 days. And that's because I created this pre-covery program, not because I'm so miraculous, but because I planned for this. And that's what I would tell each and every one of you. You're going to have some health challenges. Who knows what they're going to be? But if you plan to get through them effectively, chances are better than average that you will get through it effectively. Come out the other side and be better than you ever were.
I was reading recently that the choices in terms of what we eat today that are often connected to whether they cause inflammation or not in the body, the choices, let's just say in our 50s, will only show up in our 70s. So we really have to be cognizant of that reality and make healthy choices today because often we live in this short term
Yeah,
mindset
that's right.
about maximizing joy today, now in this present moment, but we forget about the long term impact that will hit you hard, and that's going to be so much more challenging to reverse.
Yeah, just to underline what you're saying, inflammation. Inflammation is one of the 12 hallmarks of aging. And I would say that it's one of the controllables. So you need to do what you can as you get older. As you hit 50, 60, 70, 80, and beyond, the more you can control your own inflammation, more joyful you're going to be.
Yes.
It's really simple.
I fully agree with you, and so happy that you have shared your story. It's remarkable. If there would be a recipe for joy, what would be the three main ingredients in your view for living more joyfully? Very good.
So there's three things that come to mind. One, if there was a silver bullet for aging well, to living better, longer with joy, I would say that it's exercise. Exercise not only makes you feel good physically, but mentally. It just gets those endorphins going. And if I don't exercise every day, I don't feel good. So I would say that exercise not only builds muscle mass and protects your heart, it protects your brain as well and creates that endorphin high. So exercise. Number one. Number two, control your inflammation. Inflammation may be the biggest culprit that we can control when it comes to the hallmarks of aging. I mean, if you can, through diet, through exercise, through meditation, take control of your inflammation, get rid of the bad things. We just said what they were a few minutes ago. It's not that complicated. It's gluten, dairy, and sugar. Then you're going to be solid. Within weeks, you are going to feel so much better that your joy span is going to increase exponentially. And third, spend time with your family and friends and get rid of your toxic friends and family. Eliminate them. You don't need that kind of stress in your life. You want to embrace the people who make you feel happy and get rid of the ones that just bring you down. That sounds kinda cruel, but sorry.
It's all about maximizing joy span.
It might be better for that person also because they can't be winning either if they're creating an antagonistic relationship with you.
Fully agree.
So those are the 3 things that stand out. For me, it's also following that holistic recipe. One of the things, by the way, that everybody asks me about because there's been so much conversation around it is drinking alcohol. And we know now that drinking alcohol is toxic, especially for your brain, even in small amounts. Sorry. I know I hate even saying that, but I interviewed a French neuroscientist who was in the lab researching Alzheimer's disease. And I asked her, "Hey, do you drink wine?" She goes, "Yeah, I drink it every night. I have one glass of wine with dinner." And I said, "But you know that it destroys brain cells, right?" She goes, "Yeah, but you know what? On balance, the joy it gives me to sit down to dinner with a glass of wine with my friends and family ultimately creates more brain span than I am losing. So I take that as a positive.
I love it. And what innovations in the aging and longevity space excite you the most right now?
So, for one thing, the acknowledgement that lifestyle and our environment are key to living better longer and putting us in control of our lifespan, our brain span, and our health span. To me, that's fantastic news. And you might say, "Oh, yeah, okay, so we kind of knew that before." Well, no, we didn't, because now it's scientifically proven. And that changes everything. So to me, that's gold. What else is pretty cool? There's a lot of work being done and a lot of excitement being generated by peptides, peptides for our skin, for our gut, for our moods. It's still kind of experimental, but there are some physicians out there who are qualified to work with you on peptides. And I don't know, I think that's super exciting. And then all the testing, all the diagnostics that are actually at home diagnostics, or if not at home, close to home through like Function Health, for instance. I think they're fantastic and you ought to take advantage of them.
Fully agree. If you could give our audience a challenge to pursue this week, what would it be?
The challenge, I think, would be to try to go on a positive attitude diet for a week. Just like you might watch what you eat, watch what you think and how you're thinking it, and try to change the narrative that you're giving yourself on your own aging and the aging of those around you. Try to think positively about it. This is something that I do all the time because I start to see myself go negative. This is another thing that if you have any older listeners, even if they're not older, I mean, most of us know someone right now who is really suffering or challenged by either a health issue or some kind of financial issue. I would say that giving some time and energy to them and trying to help them in some small way, but meaningful way, will actually give you a lot of joy. And I would encourage each of us, because I know I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are suffering right now, and sometimes I'm at a loss of what to do, but to do something, even if it's just a phone call or dropping off a little gift basket or something, not only makes them feel good, but it'll make you feel good.
And on these beautiful words, Maddie, it has been a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been really fun. Thanks for having me.